How's it going, man?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
Going great. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Very good. Fresh off tour. It's obviously a good time. Talk to me about how it's been so far.
Yeah, it's been a good time. We just got home a couple days ago, kind of resting and catching up on emails and admin side of music business. But the
Definitely.
shows was really good. Yeah.
Awesome. What would you say was the highlight of this latest run?
Oh man, there was a bunch. I just love when we're out and playing new venues and old venues, connecting with people that've been to our shows before and new people. We ended in Edmonton, Cook County Saloon, which is the city I was born in. And that was a wild show, nice big crowd, and people had a good time. And in turn, we had a really good time.
Did you have a lot of family and friends come out for the show?
For that one, yeah, that was the biggest guest list I had at any of the shows, that's for sure.
Talk to me about how that affects the performance, because it must be sort of a different atmosphere. I would imagine it, obviously you approach it in the same way, but it has to affect the vibe.
I think friends and family affect the vibe more. For me, it's more pre and post show. You get to see a lot of family in the green room and stuff. We're hanging out. It's not so, a lot of shows it'll just be the band and I in the green room warming up and doing our thing. And in the places where, one of us is from, it's a lot busier pre and post show.
Definitely. It's like a reunion of sorts.
Yeah.
So, man, there's a lot to talk about here with you. Obviously, you've had quite a story here leading you up to this point. Maybe if we could take it back, obviously, an incredibly impressive career in the military, the Canadian Armed Forces, Special Ops. Maybe if you could sort of give the people a bit of background on yourself. Was it more so a military start, or was the music something that was always in the picture for you? Even going back to that point.
Yeah, music's always been in the picture in terms of I've been a huge music fan my whole life. I sang in a high school band for a little while. I didn't really start to play guitar until the later part of my life. And in the military, it was, I did just about 17 years in the military. Most of it was in our special operations unit. And I had a guitar and it would kind of sit in the corner and I wouldn't touch it for a year. And then I'd pick it up and try and play the two or three chords that I remembered how to play. But it wasn't until the tail end of my military career that I just kind of got a bug for it. And it started to be what my focus was. And I knew that it was going to be the next thing that I did when I got out of the military. So for most of it, music was always around in the way that I'm a huge music fan and my days 24/7, some type of music playing. But I didn't really ever expect that I would be playing music.
So you were more so a listener at first, and you would sort of fiddle around with the guitar a little bit.
For sure, yeah.
Okay, so I mean, talk to me about joining the military. How old were you when you actually joined the Canadian Special Forces?
I finished playing hockey, so junior hockey when I was probably 22 years old, and it was kind of decision time for me in terms of career. I probably could have played like a semi-professional level hockey, but I wasn't going to go to the NHL or anything. And it was the summer off. I was training, getting ready for the next hockey season, and I learned about Canada's Special Operations Unit. I had no idea that it existed, and when I learned about it, I was kind of immediately hooked on the idea. So instead of going to try out for another hockey team, I went to the recruiting center. I was probably 23 years old, something like that, and said I want to join the military and go to special operations.
Now, what was it about the idea that made you immediately hooked? And was it something that you had thought of before that point, or when you had the idea, did it just click?
Yeah, it was just more, it clicked. I think for me, it was a lot of things that I had found in hockey. The teamwork and the challenge and not just the mental challenge of playing at a high level like that, but the physical challenge of the whole thing. And as a young man, it just seemed like that was the next mountain I wanted to climb.
And what was the reaction from people around you at that point? Because obviously, it's not an easy thing to take on. Was there a lot of hesitation from family and friends, or was there overall, a lot of support?
It was a lot of support. I think a lot of people were surprised. I'd never
Yeah.
really talked about the military. We weren't
Right.
a military family. I didn't know anyone in the army really. It was kind of out of left field, but generally supportive family members and such.
So what was the first step that you took in terms of joining, and maybe tell us a little bit about the initiation or I mean recruiting, that you had to go through?
Yeah, so in order to go to special operations or to try out rather, you have to do 2 years in the regular force military first. So I signed up to join the Army infantry. And you go through basic training and you go through your infantry training. It's all the stuff you see on shows they call boot camp. You know, they shave your head and yell at you, and you have to clean your room impeccably and shine your boots and all that stuff. That was all the first courses, and then I made it to the infantry unit that I started, which was 3 PPCLI in Edmonton, and I let them know that I wanted to train to go to special operations. So after I'd spent a couple years in that battalion training, I was ready to sign up for the JTF2 Special Operations selection. So it's a big. There's a lot of work to do before you can even go on the selection course. So, 2 years, and then you have to do a psychological test and a physical test, and you have to pass all these tests and have your chain of command support it, and then you can go do the selection, um, which is also no easy day.
Yeah. So, I mean, would you say for somebody who doesn't have experience that the shows that you see, like you mentioned, are very accurate in terms of boot camp and stuff, or were there elements of it that you didn't really expect when you first joined?
Yeah, I think Hollywood does a decent job now in the newer movies portraying stuff like special operations. When you see movies like, Zero Dark 30, stuff like that, they do a really good job portraying that. I don't think that many movies portray the initial basic training boot camp very well, at least from what I lived. Most of it was just annoying.
Okay.
Like just people yelling at you for seemingly no reason and like all this stuff. And I mean, I get what they're trying to do, but most of it, I was like, okay, I just got to get through this so that I can get to the place I want to be.
What percentage of people, I mean, obviously a rough number, would you say really make it through that point? Like, is there a lot of people that don't make it through that initial boot camp?
Yeah, there's lots of people that don't make it through. It's what we call the attrition rate. It's not that high for basic training boot camp. It gets higher for infantry training. It gets even higher if you try to go selection for special operations. And it gets even higher if you make it past selection and you go on your special operations assaulter course, is what it's called. So, uh, the more selective you want to be with where you want to go, the higher the attrition rate becomes.
Okay, so it's like your chances of getting in get sort of slimmer and slimmer the higher up you go in the ranks.
Yeah, exactly. Like the first boot camp's just to get in the military. So,
Right.
like your first basic training, you could go Army infantry, you could go a photo tech with the Air Force, you could be a musician. Any job in the whole military, Canadian Armed Forces, you have to go through the basic training first.
Okay. So, I mean, what would you say that it did to you mentally after going through that? Like, what were the ways that you really changed as a person after the first 2 years?
The first 2 years, man, I don't know if it changed me that much.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't find it really that I don't know, that life altering. More
Okay.
more afterwards, I guess. Like once I got to our special operations, I think there's a lot of lessons that I learned and growth that had happened. The first 2 years was kind of me just really putting my head down and getting to work to try and get to where I wanted to go.
Okay. So that was sort of just the initial process, and then after that, it really got serious.
Yeah.
Um, so, joining into the special operations, then what would you say were the main differences in terms of getting into that than the first 2 years?
Oh, just about everything was
Okay.
different. So like in the regular army, you have to go to work every day and polish your boots and wear a uniform and yeah, the day-to-day tasks are way different. So in special operations, it's well, when I was in, it was very mission focused. So you go to work, let's say I'm at home, I'm not deployed or I'm not gone training. You go to work and you go to what we call as the fight room. So you learn a different variety of fighting skills. You hit the gym and do your workout. You go to the shooting range, or you do what we call CQB, which is close quarters battle. And there'd be some variation of training like that every single day that you're here. So there's not a big focus on like, wearing a uniform or what your boots are or anything like that. It's just like go get the work done and get ready to deploy. And the training is better. The budgets are way better. Um, but the trade-off is the pace is insane. So you're gone or deployed, 6 to 8 months a year, every single year.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was your first overseas deployment?
I went to Afghanistan in 2000. Oh, I want to say 2009 into 2010.
Okay. And what was that like for you to actually be there as opposed to your expectations?
Um, I had done a ton of research into it, so it didn't really blow my mind. Landing in country, I kind of watched a ton of videos and sort of knew what to expect, but it's still like you can never fully immerse yourself like really being there until you get there. So like the chaos of just everything, traffic and the noise and all the things you got to watch out for, and then you settle into it a little bit when you first get there. You're looking at every single thing and every single person and try to assess everywhere. And you settle into probably where it's the most value added. You know what I mean? Like where you put your attention, where it is the best return on investment, because you can't just constantly watch everything all around you because you get burned out or maybe miss something that's important.
Right. So was music even on your mind at that point when you first got there, or did it take you some time to settle in before you even started fiddling with some chords?
Yeah, no, it wasn't really. I mean, I remember in Afghanistan and in Iraq, we had a like at any of the fobs we had, like the bases, we would have guitars kicking around, and I would grab it and try and strum a couple chords, and I'm like, I don't really care, and go. So music's always just been there, but it's never really been anything I ever thought of doing. If someone came through and they could play really good guitar, I'd see if they could show me a thing or two, and then they would leave, and I wouldn't touch it again. Um, but no, it wasn't. It was definitely not on my radar in terms of I think I want to do this.
Right. It must have been hard for you to focus on anything else at that time. So how about in terms of crossing paths with other militaries? Like, did you guys cross paths with the U.S. military at all?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Okay. So you guys were really you're in close proximity.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And what was that like? Is it a camaraderie between you guys?
Yeah, for sure. I've done a bunch of different work with uh, a whole bunch of the US units, like from, Green Berets and Delta and the Rangers, and it was always just a good working relationship. If we lived in close proximity, we'd go do shooting ranges or competitions and stuff together and hang out on spare time, do workouts and whatever. I've always had a great relationship with the US forces.
That's amazing. And you were primarily a sniper, correct?
Yeah, most of my career I was a sniper.
Okay. So, I mean, how many years would you say it takes to really hone in on those skills to get to the level that you were at? Like, how many years did it take to really feel confident?
Um, well, so I did my first sniper course when I was in the regular army,
Okay.
and then not redid, but did the special operations sniper course when I got to our unit. So I don't really count the first couple years because it's not the same level, even though the Reg Force snipers are really good. The course I did compared to the course I did when I was special operations were very different. And it took me, a good couple of years just to really learn what it was all about and learn from the guys senior to me and take the experience that they had collected overseas and on missions and have it make sense to me. Um, it takes a little while.
Sure. And you were actually involved with the team that holds the world record for the longest confirmed kill shot in military history. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So talk to me about that. What was that scenario?
So we were deployed to Iraq, and this would have been in 2017. We had an OP at the top of this building in Mosul, and we were there to support the Iraqi forces were trying to push ISIS out of Mosul. Like their last stronghold was in old Mosul, like the downtown. And so we had a position, and from there we were doing surveillance and reporting and calling airstrikes. And then when that push from the Iraqi forces started to push ISIS out, we were there to support with sniper fires and airstrikes if needed. And that's just where that it was about a week that push was happening for. Now we were in position for 50, I want to say 51 or 52 days in total, um, kind of waiting for that to happen. But
Wow.
when it did, it was just under a week, I think, of them coming across kind of our frontage as far as you could see. And yeah, we started engaging ISIS fighters, and the first hit was the shot that you're talking about there is 2.2 miles,
Wow.
3,540 meters. And then the the way the ground was shaped is just sort of got a little bit closer to us each day. And yeah, we kept engaging ISIS targets. And I said this before, we probably broke the previous record, I bet you 5 times, but we didn't really keep track of what those shots were because we already made the longest.
Right.
Yeah.
After that, you kind of stop counting.
Yeah.
What's it like for you to talk about these experiences, Dallas? Is it challenging? Is it something that you feel good talking about?
Yeah, I feel good sharing the story. It's a that whole career being almost 17 years was a big part of my adult life, and it's experiences I'm very grateful for. I mean, I'm happy to be playing country music now, but I wouldn't trade anything, leading up to this point. So they're all stories that I'm happy to tell and happy to share. And, different people get different pieces of advice or inspiration or information from the stories, and I think it's a good thing to pass that on to people.
Definitely. How about like something like PTSD, for example? Do you suffer from any form of PTSD or anything related to that?
I mean, I think because PTSD, the way it is labeled, it's a category of symptoms. And I think there's no way to go through a career as long as mine and not have some of those check the box. But I don't think I agree with the diagnosis when you attach those symptoms. So, for instance, I've deployed for a big period of my life, been in threatening positions and places, done a ton of training and surveillance and all this stuff. So when I'm out, in the street, if a car follows me for 3 turns, I think it's strange and I start paying attention more. If someone is acting weird in terms of body language when they come to a restaurant, I think it's strange and I start paying attention more. The way I position myself when I sit somewhere is different. Now, to a doctor, a psychologist, they call that hypervigilance, which is a symptom of PTSD. And I just think it's a characteristic of a life of training and deployment. And so I don't necessarily agree with how they line up. But
Right.
yes, if you were to talk to a doctor, some of the symptoms that are listed, for sure, I have them.
Okay. And I've heard many times that music can be incredibly therapeutic in treating some of those symptoms. I'm curious if you find that there's any relationship there.
Well, I think music is, and any creative work is good for anyone. I think it's like doing, a morning journal or writing poetry or whatever it is, just getting the feelings out from inside. And you don't have to write music just to try and write a hit song. Just like you don't have to make poems, to write a poetry book or whatever. Like it's about getting out what's inside and expressing it in whatever way you see fit. And I think music is really good for that, whether you had a military career or not.
100%. So talk to me about making the transition. I mean, obviously an incredible transition into country music. What was the shift that really made you say, okay, I want to really dedicate my life to this art form?
Yeah, I think it was a handful of things coming together. So I've always had this love for music, like I was saying, music was always playing. I've always loved country music. Um, and at the same time, I was starting not to love my job so much in the military. And concurrent to that, I was starting to recognize live music more. When you go to a pub and there's someone playing forever, I just didn't really, I'm like, oh, music. And then I would go, if they played a song I knew, I'd sing along and I'd, eat my wings or whatever. But then I started recognizing that like, wow, there's a lot of it out there. And it helped that I was like, at the time I was doing a dive course, like a special operation dive course in Key West, Florida, which it has tons of live music. So we were going out to see live music all the time. And I was just starting to click that like, that is the job of these people. Like their job is to be playing music right now. And I got to wake up at whatever time and go do all this army stuff. Now, at the time, it's not that terrible in Key West, but still, I was recognizing that people were doing this for a living. Um, and then one of the other things is at the time, it was the summer in 2019, my brother passed away from cancer. And he had a music studio in his basement and he was in a band. And he always asked me, "Oh, you got to come record a song and stuff." Like if I would sing something by campfire, I'm like, I don't write music. I don't have anything to record. Do you know what I mean? And so when he passed away, it was kind of like this, oh, what was I waiting for moment mixed with all these other things. Like I didn't love my job as much anymore. I was recognizing live music a lot. And then there was the, what was I waiting for to go, try and record something with my brother. And also to get me through that time, which I found very challenging, I started writing songs. So it was like all these different roads kind of leading to
Yeah.
one path where I was like, this is now what I'm going to do.
Wow. So, I mean, how did you sort of push yourself into retiring for the music? Because obviously, music is a very challenging path, and it's a challenging path to make a living in as well. Like,
Yeah.
at what point did you say, I have enough, I'm sure enough of myself to really make this jump?
Yeah, I think that's the part that hasn't really been a big issue with me in my life. So I played hockey because I loved it and I wanted to play hockey. And then when I decided I was going to go to special operations, I was like, that's what I'm doing. At first, I was like, that's what I'm doing. Now let's figure out all the stuff in between.
Right.
And the same was on the tail end of my military career. I'm like, that's what I'm doing next. Now let's figure out all the stuff in between. So I was still in the military when I started going to open mics,
Wow.
was writing songs. I would go to work and then I would go set up a PA or whatever, or plug in at a bar and play for a few hours. And it was just like, step number one, go to as many open mics as you can, learn as many songs as I can so I could play 3 hours at the local pub or bar. Now that I can do that, call every local bar and pub within 2 or 3 hours of here. Do that, repeat, 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 keep writing songs. And it was just, it's all figuring out the how in between because from day one, I was like, well, what makes a songwriter? Just someone that's writing songs. So I'm like, I'm writing songs now. I'm a songwriter. Now
There you
let's figure
go.
out. And it was just that was more my mentality. I'm like, I'm doing it, so I just got to figure out what that means.
So, how long did it actually take you to start making a living in it?
Um, well, really, like I could have maybe not fully. It was getting pretty close. Like if you play 5 bars, 5 like bar shows a week, like I was doing some weeks, you make pretty good money. And I think it's enough that most people could live on. Now, I didn't want to just be playing bar shows every week, so I had to cut back on some of that in order to write, record, tour my own music, find opening gigs with, bigger acts and go through all that stuff. So your income kind of takes a hit. So it's sort of, I don't even know if I could still answer that question when the day was, but it was like, it was good. Then you save and you spend a bunch to make an album, then you try to make it back with streaming and touring and merchandise, and then you spend a bunch more to go record, and you try and make it back, and something gets on whatever Sirius XM or some radio stuff, and you get some royalties, and then I don't know, the music business is a crazy one to try and keep track of like a consistent income, I find.
Yeah. Well, it's non-linear too, right? I mean, you can be doing really well one month and then the next month it's a challenge like you're saying
Yeah.
and it can, the cycle can repeat. So, were you independent from the start and how long did it take you to sort of start outsourcing to find, management labels, etc.?
Yeah, so independent from the start, and I still consider myself independent. I just want to build the right team around me, and where they can start doing things that I either don't want to or I'm not the expert in. Do you know what I mean? So I have a management team and they do, well, a ton of stuff, but including some booking. I still book some myself, and then I have some agents that do that as well. PR is all outsourced, marketing is all outsourced, my accounting is outsourced, lawyer, obviously.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just looking at where there's a hole in what I'm doing or what the next level is, and then trying to level up with a professional in that realm. So I've been doing a lot with, online ads and social media stuff and videographers and photographers to make sure content stuff is on. So you're just kind of forever hiring. And now, I don't think I'm not opposed to a label or a record deal, but it would really need to be the right one because any that I've seen have not been a good business decision, I don't think, from the point of where I'm looking at it right now. Um, but who knows? Maybe it's out there.
Yeah, it's possible, but I mean, a lot of the time it's kind of like a bank giving loans with like bad interest rates. You know what I mean? I mean, a lot
Terrible
of the
interest,
times, yeah,
terrible interest rates, and they
that's the
ask for
thing.
it. Yeah,
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 it's definitely swayed in the interest of the label, and we're in an interesting time where we don't really need that. So you found really some freedom in being independent, it sounds
yeah,
like.
yeah, totally. I think there's a ton of room in this business, and you can buy label services. You know what I mean? So you can have people that distribute your music if you want to give that percentage, and you can have people that do all this stuff. It's from the difference is from what I have gathered is that a label is like a gigantic marketing machine that can push you really far, really fast if you're that artist they want to focus on.
Right.
Now the stats are staggering, where it's like 90 some percent of artists that sign just kind of get shelved and ignored because their marketing dollars and their focus is going to someone else. You know what I mean? Or a person that just went viral in something and they need to capitalize. Um, so for me, I don't want to be like in the okay, go, stop, or being told like, wow, we want more music like this, a little bit less like this. Maybe your show can be like that, maybe a little bit less like this. Um, so like I said, there might be the right terms out there, but for me, I look at all of that stuff as like first a business deal. Does this make sense in terms of business? And then the art kind of second to that. And that's sort of
Right.
the only place where I put the art and creation of music second. But I think it has to, because if I just say, okay, music is first, I want the most amount of dollars and the best producer and all this stuff that they can offer me right now, I think it ends up screwing the art in the long term.
Yeah. What do you find is the harder part to manage? Is it the art piece or the business piece, and why?
Well, I think it's the business because the business time takes up so much of the creative time.
Yeah.
Like I am from the morning to the night, it's like emails and calls and like looking at what the next tour is going to be and getting music to musicians that might or might not be on the tour and then rooting it all. And then, at nighttime I'll try and sit down and like take a moment to play with my guitar and write something instead
That's
of,
it.
ideally down the line,
It's the
all parts
opposite.
are taken care of and I can just sit here and write music all day. Um, but I think the harder part is the business because just to get out there and play your music to people, it takes so much work to prepare that. And especially if you're an independent artist.
Now, speaking of the work, the single "Meet You at the Riverbank," in collaboration with Gord Bamford and Johnny Gasparik, talk to me about that. What amount of work went into that track and in the inception of it?
Yeah, so that one it was an idea I had for a long time. The idea came when I was playing all these bar shows I was telling you about, and I remember I was coming back from one at like 2 a.m. on a Saturday, and I just recalled driving in my truck back home, and it was really late, and I was super tired, and I played a bunch of shows in a row, and I remember being like, just thinking back to childhood, and no matter what Saturday night looked at, you had to go to church on Sunday morning. And I
Right.
remember driving back and I was like sort of relieved that I didn't have to go to church in the morning. It was a strange thought to have. Um, but anyway, I got the idea and made a little voice note about it. And I ended up writing Meet You at the Riverbank with two songwriters in Nashville named Blue Foley and Trick Savage, and they love the idea right from the start, and they kind of helped me mold it into the song that's out now. With a when I tell that story, certain people are like, "You heathen," but really, the message of the song is quite nice, and it's that you can kind of have or find God anywhere. Doesn't necessarily have to be within the walls of a church. Um, so it's really one of the more feel good, happy songs of my album. My stuff can be the music's a little grittier and darker sometimes, but this one was very feel good track. And yeah, Gord Bamford and Johnny helped me. I hope my kids are here having a good time. So Gord Bamford and Johnny helped me produce it, and it was along with all the other songs on my Can't Blame My Bloodline album. So the work was it was nonstop from the time I got the idea till putting it out. Now, really, it's the studio and all the stuff, and then the recording process and picking artwork and getting. So for us, we've had it on vinyl available at our shows for a while
Oh, wow.
before we put it out and release it. Kind of, I don't know what an official release is anymore these days. Is it when it's on vinyl or when it gets to Spotify and radio?
Maybe it could be. I mean, you're deciding,
Kind of
I
had
guess, at this
both.
point, right?
Yeah, we kind of had both. So we had the vinyl out and available at our live shows before it was out anywhere on DSPs or radio. Um, so yeah, it was kind of. It seems like this song has been with me for so long for it to
Yeah.
be now called, the latest single is kind of funny. But I guess it goes that way with all the songs. So, whatever song I wrote last year that might be on the next record that eventually will be a single will be something that's been with me for a long time too.
Do you find that your songs take on a new life when, once you've had them in the vault and then once people start to hear them, does it take on a new life?
Sometimes I think we like to, so just like even on this tour, we're trying out songs that I've recently written, and just see how we like it. And sometimes I'll change it around a bit until I'm really comfortable with it and be like, okay, now it's ready to be recorded. Um, and some are brand new to me when we go to the studio, like I'd just written them or whatever, and figuring out the arrangement like in the studio the day before. Um, but yeah, they take on a new life. Like some of our shows now, people know our songs, which is kind of crazy, and I'll see people singing them, and the new life is more just in the energy and the fact that people are connecting with it, and then they're singing while we're singing.
Yeah,
It's wild. So the new energy in it would be a new life for me for sure.
definitely. It must be a really crazy experience to see that and have people connecting with the music. Do you get to talk to a lot of fans after the shows?
We don't leave a venue until we've chatted with every person that wants to chat, if possible.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what's the main thing people tell you about like the takeaway from the concerts? It must vary quite
Oh,
a bit.
yeah, it varies a lot. It depends. We
Yeah.
have an audience that, I mean, as you can imagine, there's a lot of first responder and military
Mm.
folks in our audience. Um, and they have all kinds of different messages of inspiration and stuff like that, which I find super cool. And then, there's people that are like, hey, I had no idea who you were, and your music is amazing. We had to come see it. I got a vinyl. We're fans now. Um, it does range a lot, but I think what I love about music is just that, like how it connects people. And we see it the most at live shows, which is really cool.
Definitely. Have you done much touring in the States at all?
Yeah, we're starting to now. So we played a handful of shows in Nashville. We just did a big run of shows from like Georgia to Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas, and back to Tennessee. And we're planning some now in February. We're doing Canada and then into Montana and Wyoming. And then I'm going to be full time out of Nashville next month. So most of our touring and strategies will be based around living in Tennessee.
And you're in Canada now.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So you found it pretty much essential to migrate over to Nashville.
Yeah, I think it's the smartest business thing to do. Like here, I'm in Canada now. When I have days off of tour, I can work on my computer and I can still play guitar, but you're not in the hub of music
Right.
like Nashville, where you can do co-writes every day. You can be out networking with people in the business. There's just new opportunities every day. And I've been traveling down to Nashville the last just about 2 years now, and every trip has been so extremely valuable in the people that I've met or relationships that I've built that it just makes sense to move there. And, I've probably met more Canadian country music artists in Nashville than I have in Canada.
Wow.
And all of the ones that are doing really well, they say you got to move down here if you want to do this for real.
Definitely. It's surely a thriving scene out there, and it's awesome to see a lot of Canadians moving over there and making it happen. Dallas, I really appreciate the time, man. It's been awesome to get some insight, and thank you for your service as well, and keep going with the amazing music, man.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.